Hey YouTube, Gordon Miller here. So I wanted to talk about real estate and why single family or multifamily real estate, especially rental properties, can be a bad idea. Now, anybody who has followed what I've posted knows very well that I hate real estate. I hate real estate for a lot of reasons. I mean, I don't mind having someplace nice to live and spending my money and then eventually getting some of my money back from having lived in a nice place. And I've even bought a place back in '04, sold it in '05, a year and one day later, and I actually made more money living in the house than I made while I lived there. So, that was back in '04 and '05, and my salary from the company stuff was about $192,600 a year. And we made over $300,000 at closing, selling the house. So literally, I made roughly $500,000 that year. And for the majority of the year, I spent it in the backyard of the pool on my 3-acre Georgian estate, behind, brick walls. And, I made a killing. I mean, it was just it was just the way it was. And I was able to buy that, that $1 million house because I had put money into prior projects where I had paid $150 for a house and sold it for, or I paid $120 for a house and sold it for like $160 or $180. And I put that money that I had made into a down payment on a house that was $280. And then I sold that house for $375 and put the $125 that I had made, down on this $1 million house. And and then made $300,000 in a year on an investment of $900,000. So a 33% return in 1 year. You can't beat that. But you also can't duplicate it. I mean, you have to understand that, unless you want to move every year, which I don't recommend, and you have to time the market just right. I mean, the guy that bought the house at 1.2 something million, he ended up putting $400,000 into the house. And when the market crashed a couple of years later in '08 and '09, you could actually buy the house back. So this house had 1.6 million in total money invested. I could have, if he was willing to sell, I could have bought the house for $900,000 again. And, it was insane. I mean, that's an insane number. I mean, the fact that somebody lost $700,000. So I made $300,000 and made 33% of my money. But, the person who bought it afterwards, the bank bought it from him because he was being relocated and he worked for one of the banks. But when the bank resold it, they lost their ass on the house. I mean, it just, and you can buy the house back now for about 1.6 million. So it's gotten back up to about what it is. But, it's a great house. It really was. I mean, literally everything was done to it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But anyway, but generally, the problem with a real estate in general, like 1,000 units of multifamily, which Grant Cardone likes to talk about, the problem with multifamily real estate is that you have 1,000 units, and that's great because 10% of the people aren't going to pay their rent on time, if at all. And so you have like 100 people that aren't going to pay rent. But your carry cost and your overall cost and the debt maintenance and stuff like that is sufficient to where you're making enough money to where that's okay. But during times like this in the coronavirus, where people they've lost their jobs, they can't go to work, you end up with probably, I would say, half of those 1,000 random apartment units. At least half of those people aren't going to make their mortgage payments. Now, what do you do? So, if you're charging $1,000 a month for this 1,000 unit apartments, that's $1 million. So a month. And if you have half of those people that are not going to pay, you're going to be $500,000 short on your payment. And even if your profit margin is $250,000 a month, which is a nice profit for a large project like that, where's the other $250,000 coming from? I mean, it's got to come from somebody. The bank's not going to they're not going to be too happy. So it doesn't happen a lot. It doesn't happen often, but it happens. And the problem gets bigger. The scale of the problem gets bigger the more units you have. So somebody with 3 units, like a duplex or a couple duplexes, and they're even living in one, and all of a sudden 2 of those units, the one that you're in is already, you're paying 0 because the other 3 people are paying your mortgage. All of a sudden 2/3 of those payments are not going to come in, and or even 1. And that means that you're going to be short, $2,000, or $1,000 or whatever. And, it could take months for those kind of things so, where's the 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 grand, whatever it's going to come from in order to close that gap. So real estate is a dangerous investment. I'm not a huge fan of real estate just in general, but you take a huge amount for every $1 million, especially if you're self-employed or if it's a rental type thing, you need 20 to 25% down. So for every $1 million in property you buy, you need 200 to 250,000 out of your own pocket that could be somewhere else making money. Now, before a month ago, when the coronavirus hit, you could put that in stocks and be making 7 to 10%. I mean, the average market return over the last 3 years has been in excess of 20%, just in index funds of the stock market. But now things have dropped 20, 30, 40%. So, huge single day drops like we've not seen in decades. But so the real estate problem is it's also illiquid. So you don't have any liquidity. I mean, you can't get rid of it. If you have a position in gold and you have real gold coins, you can take that gold anywhere, and for a small fee of less than 10%, usually about between 5 and 8%, they will give you spot price for whatever it is, and which is a great deal. I mean, if you have $100,000 in gold, and you convert ingots or bars or whatever to money, for a fee of say 5%, they're going to make $5,000, and you'll get 95,000 out of your 100, and you're not tying up an enormous amount of, and with gold having gone from $300 an ounce to $1,300 and keeps going back and forth, but there's lots of different ways to spend your money. But the the problem I see with real estate is just that it can take you a long time to sell it, and when you sell it, your commissions are so high. I mean, you have a 6% commission you're going to have to pay to the seller, the license sales commission, the brokerage fees, all the other stuff. Closing costs can be as much as 20 grand. So you're talking about, for $1 million property at even a 5% commission, you're talking about $50,000. You're talking about $20,000 in closing cost, and so that's $70,000. And you think about all the taxes and insurance and stuff you had to pay over the years, that's probably another $50,000 on all that. So you're down 120 grand in value on a real estate before you take into account any appreciation. And it's very difficult for houses in most markets. I mean, LA and New York and a few other places are exceptions to that rule. But it's very difficult to find quality real estate markets where it's appreciating at a rate that would allow you to justify taking the long-term loss on the illiquidity of it, the brokerage commissions, the transaction fees, all the other stuff. So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And that's why I'm not really a huge fan of real estate. I look forward to seeing where all this goes while we're riding out the coronavirus lockdown, and see who ends up making their mortgage payment and who doesn't. My guess is that's going to be the top story the first couple of days, and in first 30 days or so into April is going to be brutal. So anyway, for those of you holding real estate, I wish you well. The only real estate I own in my portfolio is where I live, and always will be. I will never own real estate as a wealth generator. Now, I know some of the biggest wealth ever generated was in real estate, but that was when real estate was $1,000 an acre, and now it's $300,000 an acre or $1 million an acre, and it's generational wealth that gets passed down. Those kind of opportunities don't really exist anymore. You're not going to see $1 million an acre places that are going to all of a sudden going to go for 8 million or 10 million, so you can't get the same order of magnitude jump. But anyway, so that's why I'm not a huge fan of real estate, and frankly, why you shouldn't be either. I mean, I just don't see why in the world anybody would do that. But anyway, stay safe during the coronavirus, stay inside, practice social distancing, and above all, be kind to one another. Reach out on social media. This is a time when we need to be supporting each other and not criticizing each other. And I wish you all well. Thanks.